Somewhere in this world, between the restless noise of cities that never sleep, a small sound is born. At first, no one notices it, just a fleeting vibration escaping from a stretched string or from a human voice searching for meaning. But there is a question almost no one asks. How did sound become an industry? How did music transform from an ancient human ritual into a global trade worth billions? The story does not begin in a recording studio and not under the blinding lights of a concert stage. It begins much earlier, when the first humans sat around a fire, striking a stick against stone simply to break the silence of the night. There were no companies, no contracts, no copyrights. Music back then was something closer to breathing. It appeared and then disappeared. But history teaches us something strange. Anything that touches the human soul deeply will eventually attract money. In ancient civilizations, music was tied to power. Inside royal palaces, musicians lived under the protection of kings. Music was not owned by the artist. It was owned by the one who paid. The singer performed, and the ruler decided who would listen. And through the centuries, that rule remained quietly intact. Music appeared free, but it was always owned by someone. Then came the 19th century, the moment everything began to change. A small invention, no larger than a wooden box, quietly altered the course of music forever: the phonograph. Invented by Thomas Edison, it allowed sound to be captured for the first time in human history. Suddenly, music was no longer a fleeting event. It could be trapped inside a cylinder, stored, reproduced, and sold. Imagine that moment. For the first time ever, a human voice could become a product. And from that moment, the business of music was born. In the early 20th century, the first record companies appeared. They were not just producing music, they were selling sound. They bought an artist's voice and then sold it to the world. As technology advanced, the numbers began to grow. Records spread across Europe and America, and people began buying music the way they bought everyday goods. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Most artists did not actually own their music. The companies did. Contracts were long, complicated, and often merciless. The artist created the song, but the company owned it, sometimes forever. And this was the birth of the great music empires. Massive corporations began to dominate the industry, including Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and Warner Music Group. These companies were not merely distributors of music, they became architects of global taste. They decided which voices reached millions and which voices remained unheard. But the real explosion came in the mid-20th century when music entered the age of superstars. Artists were no longer just performers, they became global phenomena. One of the most iconic examples was Elvis Presley. He wasn't just a singer, he was an economic machine. Concert tickets, vinyl records, films, posters, merchandise, everything surrounding the artist could be sold. Music was no longer just sound, it became a brand. Then television entered the equation, and suddenly image became just as important as sound. In 1981, something appeared that would change music forever: MTV. Music videos became the new battlefield. Now artists didn't just have to sound good, they had to look unforgettable. The music video was not simply art. It was advertising. Advertising for the song, advertising for the artist, advertising for the entire industry. But the most disruptive moment had not yet arrived. At the end of the 1990s, a digital storm appeared: the Internet. And in 1999, a small platform emerged that terrified the entire music industry: Napster. Its idea was dangerously simple: free music sharing. Suddenly, millions of people began downloading songs without paying anything. Record companies panicked. Lawsuits exploded. Napster was eventually shut down, but something irreversible had already happened. The world had discovered that music could travel freely. Record sales collapsed. The industry lost billions of dollars. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire system might collapse. But instead of fighting the internet forever, the industry adapted. A new digital marketplace emerged. iTunes, launched by Apple. Songs were no longer sold as physical objects. They were sold as files. And then another idea emerged. Why should people buy songs if they could simply access them anytime? This was the birth of the streaming era. Platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music changed everything. Today, more than 600 million people listen to music through streaming platforms. They pay a monthly subscription in exchange for access to millions of songs. But here lies a strange paradox. Many artists complain more today than ever before because streaming revenue per play is incredibly small. A song might be played 1 million times, and the artist receives only a tiny fraction of the profit. Meanwhile, the platforms generate billions. Music has become like water, available everywhere, but rarely owned by the one who created it. And that raises a question the industry doesn't enjoy discussing. Is music still art, or has it become data? Today, algorithms recommend songs, shape trends, and decide what becomes popular. Not audiences, not artists. Algorithms. Perhaps this is why modern music sometimes feels strangely similar, because algorithms prefer what already works. But beneath all the technology, all the corporations, and all the billions, the ancient truth remains unchanged. The sound that once echoed around a primitive fire is now part of one of the largest industries on Earth. A global market worth more than $30 billion each year. And yet, all of this began with something incredibly simple. A human being feeling something too complex to explain and choosing to sing it. And if you enjoy discovering the hidden stories behind the systems that shape our world, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because some of the stories we explore here may change the way you see things you thought you already understood. Because the truth few people admit is that music is no longer just the language of the soul. It is a marketplace, a vast battlefield where corporations compete, algorithms guide attention, and artists struggle to survive inside the system. And yet, somewhere tonight, in a small room, a child will pick up a guitar for the first time. They will play a simple melody, a melody the world may never hear, but that sound might be the only part of this entire story that money has not touched yet.